The sound of a champagne flute shattering echoed through the penthouse like a gunshot. For a second, every conversation stopped. All eyes turned toward the Christmas tree, shimmering under golden lights, where Sophia Bennett stood, one hand clutching her swollen belly, the other holding her 1-year-old daughter, Charlotte. Her husband, Ethan, stood before her, face red, veins visible on his neck, his expensive Rolex flashing under the light as if mocking her pain. "Ethan, please," Sophia whispered, her voice trembling. "Not here. Not in front of our child." But Ethan's eyes were filled with rage, the kind that had nothing to do with love or disappointment, only ego and fear. A moment ago, someone had accidentally revealed his secret affair with his assistant. Now, cornered and humiliated, he needed someone to crush, and Sophia became the target. The guests froze. A faint Christmas song played from the piano, clashing painfully with the tension. Snow fell outside the glass walls of the Fifth Avenue penthouse, but inside, the air burned with shame. Ethan stepped closer, his breath reeking of whiskey. "You ruined everything, Sophia. You couldn't just keep your mouth shut, could you?" Sophia tried to back away, but the train of her silver Dior gown caught under the chair. She stumbled, clutching Charlotte tighter against her chest. Then, before anyone could react, Ethan's leg swung forward. The impact was brutal. Sophia fell backward, the sound of her body hitting the marble floor piercing through the gasps. Charlotte screamed. The room turned silent, horrifyingly silent. "Someone call 911, a woman shouted, dropping her iPhone. A glass of red wine spilled over the white carpet, spreading like blood. Sophia struggled to breathe. Her baby kicked inside her belly. Her vision blurred, faces blending into the twinkling lights, voices turning into echoes. She could hear Charlotte's cries, the clinking of expensive jewelry, the faint murmur of disbelief. She wanted to scream, but only a weak sob came out. Ethan straightened his tie and turned to the stunned guests. "It was an accident," he said coldly, as if trying to convince himself. She tripped. No one spoke. Even the servers stood frozen, holding trays of untouched desserts. The smell of pine and perfume mixed with fear. Then came a voice, deep, steady, and commanding, from the entrance. "An accident?" Heads turned. Standing at the doorway was Major General Marcus Hayes, in full uniform, flanked by 4 military security officers. Snowflakes clung to his shoulders. His expression was made of steel. Sophia's eyes widened. "Dad," she whispered. Ethan's face drained of color. He took one step back, trying to regain his composure, but Marcus's presence filled the entire room. Even the music stopped. The general walked slowly toward his daughter, every step echoing across the marble. He kneeled beside Sophia, gently took Charlotte from her arms, and passed the crying child to one of the guards. Then he looked at Ethan, his gaze sharp enough to slice through the air. "I warned you once," Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying the authority of decades. "You hurt my daughter again, and you answered to me." Ethan opened his mouth, but no words came. The general turned to the guests. "Everyone here is a witness," he said. "You saw what he did." The room buzzed with whispers, phones raised discreetly, cameras recording. Ethan realized too late that his perfect image was collapsing, live in front of New York's elite. And then, with terrifying calm, Marcus said the words that froze the room. "On your knees, Ethan. Now." Before that night shattered her world, Sophia Bennett's life looked perfect, at least from the outside. She lived in a glass penthouse on Fifth Avenue, with a view of the Empire State Building, sparkling like a diamond each night. Her mornings began with the soft hum of the city below and the gentle kick of her unborn baby. She worked remotely for a luxury tech company, her MacBook always open beside a half-drunk cup of Starbucks caramel latte. To everyone around her, she was the picture of success, young, beautiful, and married to one of Manhattan's rising entrepreneurs. But behind that perfect frame, Sophia lived in quiet fear. Ethan's voice, once full of charm, had turned sharp over the past year. Every small mistake became an accusation. Every silence between them felt like a warning. The man who had once held her hand under the stars now raised it in frustration when things didn't go his way. Sophia had met Ethan 5 years earlier at a charity gala hosted at the Plaza Hotel. He was confident, dressed in a black tuxedo, laughing easily with investors. She was there to manage public relations, armed with press kits and nerves. He'd told her she had the kind of smile that could sell peace to Wall Street. For a while, she believed him. Their love moved fast. Whirlwind dinners at the River Cafe, diamond bracelets from Tiffany, weekends in the Hamptons. Ethan proposed on a rooftop overlooking Central Park, promising forever. Marcus, her father, had warned her then, men who move too fast are usually running from something. She didn't listen. She was too in love, too young, and too hopeful. After marriage, the signs appeared like cracks under fresh paint. Ethan's late nights at the office, the hidden phone calls, the cold distance in his eyes. Still, Sophia held on. She told herself, marriage took effort, that all relationships had seasons. When she found out she was pregnant, she hoped it would heal them. For a brief time it did. Ethan bought her flowers, held her during doctor appointments, kissed her forehead as if trying to erase the damage. Then came the baby, Charlotte, and everything changed again. Ethan's affection faded into irritation. He hated the crying, the sleepless nights, the way Sophia's body had changed. She remembered the day she found a lipstick stain on his shirt. It wasn't hers. The scent wasn't her perfume. When she confronted him, he laughed and said she was paranoid. That night, she cried quietly beside Charlotte's crib, whispering promises to be strong, to protect her child, even if no one protected her. Sophia had grown up in a home of discipline and dignity. Her father, Major General Marcus Hayes, had served 3 tours overseas. Her mother passed away when she was 16, leaving Marcus to raise her with a soldier's heart, but a father's tenderness. He taught her about honor, strength, and resilience. But even he never imagined his daughter would marry a man capable of cruelty. On the morning of the Christmas party, Sophia stood in front of the mirror, her silver Dior gown hugging her 6-month belly. She brushed her soft brown hair, put on a light shade of lipstick, and whispered to herself, "Just get through tonight." She wanted to believe in one peaceful evening, for Charlotte, for the baby inside her, for the marriage she still tried to save. As she placed a small Tiffany bracelet on her wrist, Charlotte giggled in her crib. Sophia smiled weakly and said, "You and me, baby girl. No matter what happens." Little did she know, in just a few hours, that same bracelet would glint under the lights as she lay on the cold marble floor. And the life she had built would crumble in front of everyone. And when her father's boots echoed across that same floor, a new war was about to begin. Ethan Bennett had always been the kind of man who looked untouchable. At 34, he was the face of Bennett Capital Investments. Sharp suits, perfect hair, and a smile trained to win over both investors and enemies. His photo had once appeared on the cover of Forbes Next Gen, the caption calling him New York's rising titan. He drove a black Mercedes S-Class, wore tailored Armani, and collected Mont Blanc pens as if they were trophies. But behind that polished armor lived something rotten. A man obsessed with control and terrified of weakness. To the world, Ethan was the perfect husband, handsome, successful, and devoted. To Sophia, he was a storm she never saw coming. His love had started like sunlight, warm, consuming, impossible to resist. He'd made her feel like she was the center of his world. But as the years went on, that warmth turned into fire, and fire became smoke that choked her daily. Ethan's ambition was endless. He came from a middle-class background in Chicago, the son of a mechanic and a school teacher. From an early age, he hated being ordinary. He studied business at Columbia University on a scholarship, where he learned 2 things: that power opens every door, and that charm can hide any lie. When he met Sophia, she was exactly what he needed: beauty, elegance, and a last name that carried military prestige. Being married to the daughter of Major General Marcus Hayes gave Ethan access to rooms he could never enter alone. Sophia believed in him, supported him through his startup's early struggles, stayed up late editing proposals while he networked at rooftop bars. But success changed him. When the money started rolling in, private investors, million-dollar contracts, Ethan's humility evaporated. He began to look at people like assets, including his wife. His assistant, Tiffany Moore, was the opposite of Sophia: younger, reckless, eager to please. Ethan liked that she admired him, that she didn't question him the way Sophia did. At first, it was just late nights in the office, then expensive gifts, then whispers. By the time Sophia was pregnant, the affair was no longer a secret to anyone except her. Still, Ethan hid behind the perfect image. He needed Sophia's respectability, her father's influence, her class, her quiet grace. But deep inside, resentment grew. He hated that people said Marcus had helped him. He hated that Sophia didn't worship him like she used to. So he began to test her, breaking small boundaries. A raised voice, a cruel word, a slammed door. Each time she forgave him, his cruelty grew bolder. By December, the cracks had become canyons. Sophia had caught glimpses of Tiffany's texts, smelled unfamiliar perfume, and noticed Ethan's new cologne, one she hadn't bought. Yet she said nothing. Not until that Christmas Eve, when she found a message that ended with, "Can't wait to see you tonight, baby. Wear the tie I got you." Ethan saw the message open on his phone and knew the illusion was collapsing. He was supposed to arrive at the party arm in arm with Sophia, surrounded by donors and clients, projecting the image of Manhattan's power couple. Instead, she stood silent beside him, eyes red, a forced smile on her face. At the penthouse, his nerves pulsed beneath his polished surface. Every handshake, every camera flash felt like judgment. He downed 2 glasses of whiskey to steady himself, smiling for the crowd while scanning the room for Tiffany, who lingered near the bar in a black silk dress. He thought he could balance both worlds, until someone whispered, "Did you hear? His wife knows." For a man who built his life on perception, that single rumor was lethal. The mask cracked, rage boiled. And when Sophia quietly confronted him near the Christmas tree asking only, "Why, Ethan?" his pride detonated. That was the moment he lost control and chose violence over truth. In the beginning, Ethan and Sophia were the couple everyone admired. Their wedding had been the talk of Manhattan society, a ceremony held at St. Patrick's Cathedral, followed by a glittering reception at the Plaza Hotel. She wore a long-sleeved lace gown, her father walked her down the aisle, and Ethan had looked at her as if nothing else in the world existed. For a while, it felt like forever truly meant forever. They were unstoppable, beauty and ambition in perfect balance. Their honeymoon was in Santorini. Sophia still remembered the scent of salt and wine, the sunsets that painted Ethan's skin gold. He'd whispered dreams about building a life together, about a house near Central Park, about children who would inherit the best of them both. Back then, she thought his eyes were filled with sincerity. She didn't yet know that they were filled with hunger. Not for love, but for power. The first shift happened subtly. Ethan began to work longer hours. He claimed it was for their future, for financial freedom, for the empire he wanted to build. Sophia believed him. She stayed home, cooked late dinners, waited by the window as his black Mercedes pulled in past midnight. When he came home smelling like expensive perfume that wasn't hers, she convinced herself it was business dinners, networking, harmless indulgence. Then came the silence. Long, cold silences that filled their apartment like fog. Ethan stopped asking about her day. He criticized small things, her cooking, her clothes, the way she talked too softly. One night when she tried to tell him she felt lonely, he responded with a smirk. "You have everything you could want, Sophia. Maybe you're just bored." Sophia had grown up in a house built on discipline, but also kindness. Her father taught her that love required strength, not submission. But she wanted her marriage to work. She thought patience could heal pride. So she smiled for the world and broke in silence behind closed doors. When she got pregnant, everything seemed to brighten for a while. Ethan bought baby clothes, talked about family trips, and even showed up to the first ultrasound, tears in his eyes. Sophia thought maybe, just maybe, this was the man she'd fallen in love with again. But the illusion didn't last. The closer she got to giving birth, the colder he became. The day Charlotte was born, Ethan arrived 2 hours late. He kissed Sophia's forehead and called her "my strong girl," but his phone never left his hand. She saw the name Tiffany Moore flash across his screen as he stepped outside to take the call. Still, Sophia tried to forgive. She believed families could survive storms. She told herself, "He's just stressed. Things will get better." But deep down she knew the man she married was gone. What remained was a stranger wearing his face. Their fights became routine. Sometimes about money, sometimes about his absence, sometimes about nothing at all. He'd say cruel things, then buy her gifts the next day. Chanel bags, jewelry, hollow apologies wrapped in ribbon. Sophia began to feel like an ornament, not a partner. One evening, while she was putting Charlotte to bed, she overheard Ethan on the phone. "She's too soft," he said. "She wouldn't survive a day without me." The words pierced her heart, not because they were cruel, but because he truly believed them. The weeks before Christmas were a blur of tension. Sophia decorated the tree alone. Ethan was out closing deals, and she wrapped gifts by herself. She placed a small box under the tree. A new Mont Blanc pen for him, engraved with the words, "To the man I still believe in." She hoped it would remind him that love was still possible. But love was no longer enough. Because on Christmas Eve, under the glow of those same lights, Ethan would prove that some men destroy what they can't control. The snow outside Manhattan glowed like powdered glass that night. Inside the Bennett penthouse, Christmas shimmered with false perfection. A 20-foot tree dressed in white lights, champagne fountains bubbling beside trays of caviar, and the faint scent of Dior Sauvage floating through the air. Guests laughed near the balcony overlooking Fifth Avenue, their voices rising above the soft jazz playing from a live band. Everything looked picture perfect, except for the woman standing near the fireplace, clutching her daughter close, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Sophia had spent the afternoon preparing for this night. It was supposed to be a celebration. Ethan's company had just secured a multi-million-dollar investment deal, and he wanted to impress everyone who mattered. For Sophia, it was another test of endurance. She wore a silver gown that shimmered under the chandeliers, her pregnant belly accentuating her fragile grace. Her hair was pinned perfectly, her makeup soft and warm, but inside, she felt hollow. Ethan was already drunk by 8. He moved through the crowd like a politician, shaking hands, making promises, laughing too loudly. Beside him was Tiffany Moore, the assistant, wearing a black silk dress that left little to the imagination. She shouldn't have been there. The invitation list had been exclusive, but Ethan had insisted, calling her essential to his team. Sophia knew better. She had seen the way Tiffany's hand lingered on his arm, the way Ethan's gaze followed her across the room. "Smile, darling," Ethan whispered when he passed by Sophia, his tone sharp behind his grin. "You look miserable. You'll ruin the photos." Sophia forced a nod. She held Charlotte tighter, the little girl playing with the tiny Tiffany bracelet around her mother's wrist. Her heart pounded. The room spun with noise, laughter, and secrets. A part of her wanted to leave, but pride kept her standing. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Then, as fate would have it, the truth came out. Not by Sophia, but by accident. A guest, slightly drunk and unaware, laughed too loudly near the buffet table. "Ethan, I saw your assistant buying that tie for you last week. You two make quite the pair." The words hung in the air like a gunshot. The room went quiet. Ethan froze. Sophia's eyes locked on him, searching for denial, for a lie, but all she saw was guilt. The color drained from his face. Tiffany tried to laugh it off, but her nervous chuckle only made it worse. "Is that true?" Sophia asked softly, her voice trembling but steady enough to reach every ear in the room. Ethan turned toward her, his smile gone. "Sophia, don't do this here." "Do what? Ask why the man I married is sleeping with his assistant?" Her words sliced through the music like glass. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Someone whispered. Someone else recorded. Ethan's jaw tightened. "You're embarrassing yourself," he hissed. Sophia took a step forward, her hand shaking. "No, Ethan, I'm done being your silence." That was when his mask cracked. In front of clients, investors, and cameras, Ethan's fury erupted. "You ungrateful," he snapped, grabbing her arm. When she pulled away, he shoved her back, harder than he meant to. Her heel slipped. The next few seconds played out like a nightmare. Her body twisting, the sound of her Dior bracelet clinking against the marble floor, Charlotte's cry cutting through the gasps. Ethan's foot struck her abdomen before he even realized what he'd done. The room screamed. The music stopped. Champagne spilled. Sophia lay on the ground, clutching her stomach, tears mixing with blood. Her baby kicked inside, still fighting. And then, from the entrance, came the echo of boots, a sound that would change everything. The marble floor was cold against Sophia's cheek. She could hear the distant hum of the city outside, the muted horns, the soft snowfall tapping the glass. But inside the penthouse, everything was chaos. Voices shouting, footsteps rushing, someone crying. The lights seemed too bright, the music long gone. All she could think about was the small life inside her, the frantic heartbeat she prayed hadn't stopped. Charlotte's cries pierced through the noise, raw and terrified. A woman, someone from the crowd, knelt beside Sophia, wrapping her coat around her shoulders. "Don't move, sweetheart. Help is coming," she whispered. But Sophia couldn't hear her anymore. Her gaze drifted toward Ethan, standing only a few feet away, frozen like a man who didn't understand what he'd done. His face was pale, his tie crooked, his hand trembling. "Ethan," Sophia choked out, her voice barely a breath. "Our baby." He didn't answer. Instead he muttered, "She fell. It was an accident." The lie made something inside her shatter. Even now, as she bled on the floor, he still cared only about his image. Cameras were still rolling, phones still raised. He glanced toward his investors, desperate, calculating, and straightened his jacket like a coward trying to look dignified. Then came the sound that silenced everyone. The heavy slam of the elevator doors. The sharp rhythm of boots crossing the marble. Major General Marcus Hayes. He moved like a storm, calm on the surface, deadly underneath. His uniform was pressed, his medals gleaming faintly under the chandelier. 4 military security officers followed him, but none dared step ahead. He didn't need backup. His presence alone was enough. Sophia lifted her head weakly. "Dad." Marcus's eyes softened when he saw her, but only for a heartbeat. Then they hardened into steel. He took 2 steps forward, looked down at Ethan, and said in a low, thunderous tone, "What did you do to my daughter?" Ethan stammered. It's not what it looks like." Marcus didn't blink. "You laid hands on a pregnant woman, my pregnant daughter." His voice cut through the room like a blade. "You dishonored her. You dishonored this family. You dishonored yourself." Guests stood frozen. Even the servers backed away, their trays shaking. The only sound was Charlotte's whimpering. Marcus turned to one of his men. "Secure the room." Within seconds, the soldiers moved, blocking the exits, asking guests to stay where they were. Someone tried to protest, but one look from Marcus shut them up. Ethan's composure crumbled. "Marcus, please. I lost my temper. It was just a mistake." "A mistake," Marcus repeated, kneeling beside Sophia. He touched her face gently, his voice softening for her alone. "Stay with me, sweetheart. You're safe now. I've got you." Sophia's tears fell silently. She wasn't afraid anymore. Her father's voice, steady and commanding, felt like home. Then Marcus stood up again, facing Ethan. The fury in his eyes was the kind that only comes from love, a father's love turned into justice. "Look around, Ethan," he said. "Every person here saw you. Every camera captured it. You didn't just break a vow, you broke the woman who believed in you." Ethan dropped his head, his breath shaking. He wanted to disappear, but there was nowhere to hide. Marcus took a deep breath, then gave the order that made the room gasp. "Kneel." Ethan hesitated. Marcus's voice rose, no longer a request, but a command forged in war. "On your knees." The echo bounced off the walls. Ethan's legs gave out. He sank to the floor, trembling, eyes wet, humiliated before the same people who once envied him. Sophia looked on, her vision blurred, but her heart awakening. For the first time, Ethan wasn't the man in control. And as the sirens wailed outside, she knew this was the moment everything would change. The ambulance lights painted the snow outside in flashes of red and blue. The air was sharp with sirens, voices, and the chaos that follows every tragedy. Sophia lay on a stretcher, her face pale, her hair matted against her cheeks. Her Dior gown was torn, streaked with blood and wine. Charlotte clung to a medic's jacket, her small hand trembling. Major General Marcus Hayes walked beside the stretcher, his uniform coat open, his jaw clenched hard enough to crack. Every step he took echoed with fury and grief. "She's stable," one of the paramedics said. "The baby's heartbeat is strong, but we need to move quickly." Marcus nodded, his voice steady but his eyes filled with storm. "Do whatever it takes. She's my only daughter." Inside the penthouse, the crowd had dissolved into whispers and shame. The party that had been meant to celebrate success now looked like a crime scene. Champagne flutes stood half full, glittering under the lights like ghosts of a life that had just ended. Ethan sat on the floor, handcuffed, surrounded by security officers. His once perfect suit was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, his face streaked with sweat. "Marcus, please," he begged as the general walked past him. "Don't ruin my life. It was a mistake. I didn't mean to hurt her." Marcus stopped, turning his head slowly. His voice was calm, but every syllable hit like a bullet. "You already did, and now you'll answer for it." Ethan tried to stand, but the guards forced him back down. The flash of cameras from outside the glass windows captured the moment. A fallen man, kneeling in disgrace, his pregnant wife being carried away, and a father in uniform standing between justice and rage. At New York Presbyterian Hospital, the world felt colder. Machines beeped softly. The smell of antiseptic filled the air. Sophia lay unconscious under white sheets, a monitor tracing the rhythm of her heart and the baby's. Marcus sat beside her, his large hands folded tightly, his eyes fixed on her face. He remembered the day she was born, the way she'd wrapped her tiny fingers around his thumb. He remembered promising her mother on her deathbed that he'd always protect their daughter. And tonight, he'd kept that promise. But at a price that would never fade. Hours passed. Doctors came and went. Around dawn, Sophia opened her eyes. The world looked blurry, but her father's face came into focus first. "Dad?" she whispered. He leaned closer, relief softening his voice. "I'm here, sweetheart. You're safe now." Sophia's hand moved instinctively to her stomach. "The baby?" Marcus smiled faintly. "Still fighting, just like you." Tears slipped down her cheeks. She turned her face away, the memories of the night flooding back. The look in Ethan's eyes, the crowd's silence, the pain. "He kicked me, Dad. He actually kicked me." Marcus's expression darkened. "He won't touch you again. Not ever." Sophia closed her eyes. "Why did he hate me so much? I did everything right. I stood by him when no one else did." "Because some men mistake kindness for weakness," Marcus said quietly, "but you'll show him he was wrong." Outside the hospital window, dawn crept over the skyline, painting Manhattan in pale gold. The city was waking up, but for Sophia everything had changed. The life she knew was gone, her marriage, her home, her trust. A nurse entered, holding a clipboard. "Mrs. Bennett, the police are waiting downstairs. They'll need your statement." Sophia hesitated, her hand trembling. Marcus placed his palm over hers. "You don't owe anyone silence anymore," he said. "Tell them everything." She nodded slowly. The fear inside her began to turn into something else. Resolve. As she watched the first rays of sunlight hit the city, Sophia whispered to herself, "He took my peace, but he won't take my future." And that was the moment the victim inside her began to die, and the woman ready to rise was born. The hospital room had gone quiet, except for the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor and the soft cooing of baby Charlotte asleep in her crib. Snow continued to fall outside, blanketing the city in white, as if trying to cover the ugliness that had just unfolded. Sophia sat up slowly, her body weak but her spirit awakening. The bruises on her arms were dark, and a faint ache still pulsed in her abdomen. But she was alive. Her baby was alive. That was all that mattered. Her father, Marcus Hayes, stood by the window, his phone pressed to his ear. "Yes," he said into the receiver. "I want full surveillance footage from the penthouse, every angle, and make sure the press gets it before noon." He paused, his jaw tightening. "No, I don't care about his lawyers. Let the world see who he really is." Sophia looked at him, the man who had always been her protector. She had never seen him like this, cold and methodical, a general even off the battlefield. "Dad," she said softly, "don't make this about revenge." Marcus turned to her, his voice steady. "This isn't revenge, Sophia. This is justice." She lowered her gaze. "Justice doesn't heal pain." He sighed and sat beside her. "No," he said, "but it stops the bleeding." Sophia smiled weakly. Her father's strength comforted her, but deep down, she knew healing had to start from within. No public humiliation of Ethan could erase what he did. The real war would be the one inside her, learning to breathe again, to trust again, to live again. Later that morning, the door opened. A familiar voice greeted them. "Good morning, Mrs. Bennett." It was Detective Laura Keene, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a kind smile. She placed a recorder on the table. "I know this is hard, but we need your statement." Sophia nodded. "I'm ready." As she spoke, her voice trembled but never broke. She described every detail, the whispers, the argument, the shove, the kick, the faces that looked away. Each word lifted a weight from her chest. When she finished, Detective Keene said gently, "You did the right thing." After the detective left, Sophia leaned back against her pillow. For the first time, she felt something shift inside her. Not rage, not grief, but a quiet determination. She wasn't going to be the woman everyone pitied. She was going to be the woman who survived. Marcus's phone buzzed again. He looked at the screen and exhaled through his nose. "It's starting," he said. "The footage from the party has already leaked online." Sophia froze. "Leaked?" He nodded. "The media is running it on every major channel. They're calling it the Christmas party scandal. Her heart raced. Dad, I didn't want, Marcus interrupted gently. You didn't do this. He did. The truth doesn't destroy innocent people. Hours later, from the small hospital TV, Sophia watched her husband's fall in real time. Reporters stood outside the penthouse, flashes blinding him as he tried to hide his face. The same investors who once toasted his name now refused to speak to him. His company issued a statement announcing his suspension. Tiffany Moore, his mistress, had vanished. Sophia turned off the TV and stared at her reflection in the black screen. Her eyes looked different, harder, wiser. For the first time, she saw a woman who had faced hell and still stood breathing. Marcus walked over, placing a warm hand on her shoulder. It's over, he said. She shook her head slowly. No, Dad, it's just beginning. Outside, the snow began to melt as the sun broke through the clouds, because beneath her fragile calm, Sophia was already planning the next chapter. One where she wouldn't just survive, she'd rise. The next 72 hours turned Ethan Bennett's empire into ashes. What began as whispers in private circles became a full-blown media storm. Every major outlet in New York ran the same footage: the glittering penthouse, the Christmas lights, and the moment Ethan kicked his pregnant wife to the floor. The video looped endlessly on TV screens and social media feeds. There was no escaping it. At first, Ethan tried to fight back. His lawyers released statements calling it an unfortunate misunderstanding, but no amount of spin could clean the blood off the marble floor. Investors withdrew. Board members resigned. Even his closest allies refused to answer his calls. The man who once commanded rooms with a handshake now found every door closed. On the fourth day, he stepped out of his Park Avenue condo to find reporters waiting, microphones thrust into his face. Mr. Bennett, did you assault your wife? Is it true you were having an affair with your assistant? What do you have to say to your unborn child? His jaw clenched as flashes exploded like lightning. He muttered, no comment, and pushed through the crowd, but the cameras followed. The world he built on charm and control was crumbling, and this time, there was no script to save him. Meanwhile, in a quiet hospital room overlooking the East River, Sophia watched it unfold from her iPad. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She simply watched the man she once loved being stripped of everything he valued: reputation, power, respect. Marcus stood beside her, arms crossed. He's finished, he said simply. Sophia closed the tablet and whispered, no, Dad, he's exposed. The difference mattered. Ethan's fall wasn't her victory. Her victory would be reclaiming her life, her identity, and the future he tried to destroy. Later that evening, Marcus received a call from the district attorney. We're pressing charges, he said. Domestic assault and endangerment of a pregnant woman. Marcus looked at his daughter. You're ready for this? Sophia nodded. I was ready the moment he hit me. That night, while the city outside buzzed with scandal, Sophia sat by the window, sipping tea from a white hospital cup. Snowflakes swirled against the glass. Charlotte slept soundly beside her crib. The baby inside her kicked gently, as if reminding her of life beyond the pain. She whispered, we're going to be okay. Across town, Ethan sat alone in his penthouse, the same place where his downfall began. The Christmas decorations still hung, mocking him. Empty champagne bottles littered the counters. He stared at his reflection in the dark window, seeing not the powerful investor, but a man broken by his own arrogance. His phone buzzed again. Another news alert, another headline. He threw it across the room, shattering the screen. His own face blinked from the TV behind him. Ethan Bennett, from Wall Street golden boy to domestic abuser. For the first time, the silence scared him. Without Sophia's voice, without her forgiveness, there was nothing left. The next morning, police arrived. He didn't resist when they cuffed him. Cameras swarmed as he was escorted through the lobby, head bowed, coat collar turned up. Once, he would have smirked for the cameras. Now he couldn't even lift his eyes. Back at the hospital, Sophia's nurse turned on the TV and gasped. They arrested him, she said softly. Sophia exhaled, not in triumph but in release. Good, she said. Let the world see who he really is. Marcus walked in with coffee, setting it on her tray. You don't have to watch anymore, sweetheart. I know, she replied, but I need to remember. He looked at her curiously. Remember what? Sophia's eyes hardened, calm but fierce. What I survived. Outside, the storm had passed. The skyline glimmered under pale winter sun. But deep inside, Sophia knew this was only the end of his story. Hers was just beginning. 2 months later, Manhattan began to thaw. The snow melted from the sidewalks, and the chill in the air turned into the quiet hum of early spring. Sophia Bennett stood on the balcony of her new apartment overlooking Central Park, wrapped in a cream wool coat, holding a cup of coffee. The city stretched before her, loud, alive, and indifferent. But for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel invisible. She felt strong. Life after the scandal hadn't been easy. Reporters camped outside the hospital for weeks, hungry for more drama. Strangers online called her brave. Others called her foolish for staying so long. But Sophia didn't respond to any of it. Healing wasn't loud. It was silent, slow, and sacred. Her father had insisted she stay with him, but Sophia chose otherwise. "I need to rebuild my life on my own terms," she'd said. Marcus respected that. He checked in daily, but he let her stand on her own feet. Now, Charlotte babbled happily in her playpen, while the morning light spilled across the floor. Sophia smiled down at her daughter, brushing a curl from her forehead. The unborn baby still grew strong inside her, a heartbeat of hope she carried everywhere. On the table beside her sat a worn copy of Women Who Run with the Wolves and her MacBook Air. She had been drafting the proposal for her new business, a PR firm that focused on rebuilding women's reputations after public scandals. She called it Phoenix Media. Her old boss from Bennett Capital had quietly reached out, offering her a position back in corporate communications. She declined. "I'm done cleaning up after powerful men," she said. "I'll help women tell their own stories now." The doorbell rang. It was Marcus, in uniform as always, holding a box of baby clothes and a small smile. "Brought some supplies for my favorite girls," he said. Sophia laughed softly. "You've already given me everything I need, Dad." He looked around the apartment, minimalist, bright, peaceful, and nodded with approval. "You've done well," he said. "Your mother would be proud." They sat together, watching Charlotte play. After a moment, Marcus asked, "Have you heard from him?" Sophia shook her head. "His lawyers tried to reach out for a settlement. I told them I'd see him in court." Marcus smiled faintly. "That's my girl." She took a deep breath, then said, "You know, for a long time I thought I wanted him to apologize, to admit he was wrong. But now, I don't need that. I don't need anything from him anymore." Marcus reached over, squeezing her hand. "That's freedom, Sophia. Not revenge, freedom." Later that evening, Sophia walked through Central Park with Charlotte in her stroller. The air smelled of blooming cherry trees. People passed by, smiling, not recognizing the woman who had once been the face of a scandal. She liked it that way. She was just another person, a mother, a survivor, a woman rewriting her story. As she sat on a bench, her phone buzzed with a notification. A news headline: "Ethan Bennett sentenced to 3 years in prison for domestic assault." Sophia stared at the screen for a long moment, then locked it and slid the phone into her pocket. She didn't need to read more. The past had already had enough of her time. She lifted Charlotte into her arms and whispered, "We're free, baby girl. We're finally free." The sun dipped behind the skyline, painting the sky orange and pink. Sophia watched it, feeling something deep and unshakable. Peace. She smiled and said quietly to herself, "They thought I'd break, but I built something stronger instead." And with that, the story of Sophia Bennett, once a victim, now a warrior, truly began. The world had moved on from the Christmas party scandal, but Sophia Bennett hadn't. She'd built her new life with discipline and quiet strength. Morning jogs through Central Park, therapy sessions every Thursday, and long nights spent building Phoenix Media from her living room. Yet beneath her calm exterior, one question still haunted her. Why had Ethan snapped that night? Anger alone couldn't explain it. There had to be more, something darker. One rainy afternoon, Marcus visited her apartment, his uniform coat dripping by the door. "Sophia," he said, setting a folder on her kitchen counter, "I think you should see this." Sophia frowned. "What is it?" Background on Ethan's company. "I had some friends in the intelligence division dig a little deeper." She hesitated. "Dad, I don't want to get dragged back into that world." Marcus met her eyes. "You deserve the truth. You were married to him. You carried his child bort. You need to know what you were living inside." Sophia stared at the folder for a long time. Finally, she opened it. Inside were financial reports, bank transfers, and internal emails. At first they looked ordinary, typical corporate paperwork. But one name kept appearing: Tiffany Moore. Sophia's stomach turned. His assistant. Marcus nodded. She wasn't just his assistant, she was his partner in more than one way. As Sophia flipped through the pages, her pulse quickened. There were offshore accounts, shell companies, and large transfers made right before the scandal broke. Millions of dollars had vanished, siphoned out of Bennett Capital through fake consulting invoices signed by Tiffany. Sophia looked up, horrified. He was laundering money? Marcus nodded grimly. And that Christmas party? He was under investigation. The pressure was closing in. When you confronted him, you became the spark that exposed everything. He lashed out because he was already falling apart. Sophia's hands trembled as she held the documents. For months, she had blamed herself, wondering if she'd said something wrong, pushed him too far. But now she saw it clearly. Ethan's violence wasn't about her. It was about his own guilt. Marcus continued. The DA's office is reopening parts of the case. If they can prove financial crimes, he'll be in prison for a lot longer than 3 years. Sophia exhaled, her shoulders sinking. He built everything on lies. Her father's expression softened. And you built everything on truth. That's why you'll win. That night after Marcus left, Sophia sat alone with the folder spread across her dining table. The rain tapped against the windows. She read every document twice, piecing together the puzzle of the man she'd once loved. For the first time, she saw him not as her abuser, not even as her ex-husband, but as a weak man who'd mistaken cruelty for power. Her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. You don't know everything, meet me tomorrow, TM. TM. Tiffany Moore. Sophia's blood ran cold. The next morning, she met Tiffany at a small cafe near Bryant Park. The younger woman looked different, nervous, pale, her once sleek confidence gone. I shouldn't even be talking to you, Tiffany said, glancing around, but I can't keep quiet anymore. Sophia folded her arms. Then talk. Tiffany took a deep breath. Ethan wasn't just stealing money, he was funding something bigger: political donations, shady tech investments, maybe even government contracts. He told me if anyone found out, I'd go down with him. Tears filled her eyes. I was stupid, Sophia. I thought he loved me, but when it all fell apart, he tried to pin everything on me. Sophia sat back, her mind racing. Why tell me this? Because you're the only one strong enough to finish what he started, Tiffany whispered. You're the only one they'll listen to now. Sophia looked out the cafe window. The reflection staring back at her wasn't the broken woman from the hospital. It was someone different. Calm, focused, powerful. She turned back to Tiffany and said quietly, Then let's finish it. And in that moment, Sophia's story stopped being about survival and became a mission. The next morning, Manhattan was still wet from the night's rain, its streets glistening beneath the soft glow of sunrise. Sophia sat in her kitchen, a steaming cup of coffee in her hands, staring at the folder of documents spread across the table. Her mind felt like a chessboard, every memory of Ethan rearranging itself into a new truth. For months she had seen herself as a victim, but now she realized she held the evidence that could destroy what was left of his empire. Her phone buzzed. It was Tiffany again. I found more files. I'll send them encrypted. Use them carefully. Sophia exhaled slowly. She didn't trust Tiffany. Not entirely, but she trusted patterns, and every piece of paper confirmed the same one. Ethan's empire was built on corruption. He wasn't just a cruel husband, he was a criminal hiding behind charm and luxury. By noon, Marcus arrived, carrying a briefcase. You ready? He asked. Sophia nodded. I think it's time we stop letting him control the narrative. They sat together at her dining table, the city humming quietly outside. Marcus laid out a plan, one that was both tactical and personal. If we want to make sure this doesn't get buried by lawyers, you'll need to take this public, carefully. You've built credibility through Phoenix Media. Use it. Sophia frowned. You mean, tell my story again? He met her eyes. No, tell the truth. This time, not as his victim, but as his equal, the woman who ended the lie. That night, she opened her MacBook Air and began to write. The article started simply. My name is Sophia Bennett. You know me as the woman from the Christmas scandal. But what you don't know is the truth behind the man who built that empire. Each sentence came like a heartbeat. Steady, sharp, unstoppable. She described the manipulation, the control, the hidden accounts, and the betrayal that had nearly cost her and her unborn child their lives. She attached evidence, bank statements, emails, contracts, and at the end she wrote the line that would go viral. Power built on cruelty collapses under truth. By morning, the article went live on Phoenix Media's website. Within hours, it was everywhere. The New York Times, Forbes, CNN. Reporters quoted her courage. Women across the country shared it with messages of solidarity. The name Sophia Bennett no longer meant scandal. It meant strength. Meanwhile, inside Rikers Island, Ethan saw the article on a smuggled newspaper. His hands shook with rage. "She can't do this," he muttered. "She'll ruin everything." His lawyer warned him. "She already has." The DA reopened the financial case. "They're adding new charges." Ethan slammed his fist against the table. She wouldn't dare. But she already had. That afternoon, Sophia met Tiffany again at a small office space she had rented for Phoenix Media's expansion. Tiffany brought a flash drive. "This is everything," she said. "It proves he funneled money through offshore accounts tied to politicians. You'll want to give this to the FBI, not the press." Sophia accepted the drive carefully. "Why help me now?" Tiffany looked down. "Because I helped destroy you once. It's time I help rebuild you." Sophia studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Then let's make sure the truth doesn't die quietly." That night, Sophia sent the files directly to the FBI's cybercrime division using a secure upload system. She closed her laptop, exhaled deeply, and whispered to herself, "It's done." The city outside glowed under the streetlights. Somewhere across the river, sirens wailed. Maybe for someone else, maybe for him. Sophia looked down at her belly, feeling the baby kick. "You'll never have to fear the world I lived in," she said softly. Because this time, she wasn't just surviving the story, she was rewriting it. Spring had finally settled over New York, washing away the remnants of a bitter winter. The cherry blossoms along Central Park South fluttered like small pink miracles, and the city, so full of ghosts, felt alive again. In a quiet corner apartment overlooking the skyline, Sophia Bennett stood before a mirror, fastening a small silver clasp on her wrist, the same Tiffany bracelet she'd worn the night her life collapsed. It no longer symbolized pain. It was now her armor. 6 months had passed since the Christmas party. The baby in her belly had grown stronger, her heartbeat steady and fierce. Phoenix Media had blossomed too. What began as one woman's fight to reclaim her voice had become a network of women helping other survivors share theirs. Every morning, emails poured in from around the country, women thanking Sophia for giving them courage. She didn't just survive, she transformed. Her wardrobe changed, her energy changed. Even the way she spoke carried a quiet authority. Gone was the timid wife who whispered apologies. In her place stood a woman who'd stared down humiliation, grief, and fear, and had risen unshaken. That morning, Marcus arrived in full uniform. "You look ready," he said, smiling with fatherly pride. Sophia returned the smile. "For what?" "For your speech tonight," he said. "They're honoring you at the Women of Courage Gala. CNN, the Times, everyone's going to be there." Sophia exhaled slowly. "I'm not used to being the one on stage." Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder. "You've stood on harder ground than a stage, sweetheart. You stood on the edge of hell and walked out carrying life." That evening, the Plaza Hotel glittered beneath golden chandeliers. The same ballroom where she had once danced beside Ethan now belonged to her, not as someone's wife, but as her own name. Cameras flashed as she entered, wearing a deep emerald gown that shimmered under the lights. Charlotte, now 2, stayed home with her grandparents, but Sophia carried a small locket around her neck with her children's initials, her silent reminder of why she fought. When she stepped onto the stage, the room hushed. She took a breath, gripping the podium, her reflection glimmering on the teleprompter. "I was once told," she began, her voice steady, "that silence protects power. But I learned that silence only protects abusers. The moment I spoke the truth, I lost everything. Reputation, love, safety. But what I gained was something unbreakable. Freedom." She paused, her eyes scanning the room. Investors, politicians, journalists, the same kind of crowd that once looked through her as if she didn't exist. "Not tonight. I used to believe that forgiveness meant letting people hurt you without consequence," she continued. "But real forgiveness is when you stop letting them live rent-free in your heart. Tonight, I stand here not as a victim, but as proof that no one, No man, no scandal, no mistake gets to define you. The audience erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. Marcus stood at the back of the room, his eyes glistening with pride. As Sophia stepped down from the stage, a man approached her. Tall, kind eyes, familiar face. "Miss Bennett," he said softly. "I'm Alex Carter. I've been following your story. I'm a writer for The Atlantic. I'd love to interview you, not about what happened, but about what's next." Sophia smiled, surprised by the warmth in his tone. "What's next?" she repeated. "That's a good question." Alex smiled. "Maybe dinner sometime? Off the record." For the first time in a long time, Sophia laughed. A genuine, unguarded laugh. As she left the ballroom, her father waiting proudly at the car, she looked back at the glittering chandeliers, the echoes of applause still ringing in her ears. Because tonight wasn't about her pain anymore. It was about her rebirth, and she was finally ready to live again. The morning after the gala, Sophia woke to sunlight spilling through her curtains and the faint laughter of Charlotte playing in her room. For the first time in what felt like forever, her heart felt light. The storm that had once defined her life was gone, and in its place stood calm. The kind of peace that comes only after surviving something that should have broken you. She made breakfast, humming softly to herself as the smell of pancakes filled the kitchen. Her phone buzzed on the counter, a text from Alex Carter, the journalist she met at the gala. "Coffee today? I promise. No interviews. Just two people talking about life." Sophia smiled. For months she'd avoided men entirely. She didn't want admiration, attention, or sympathy. She wanted safety. Something Ethan had stolen from her. But there was something different about Alex. When he'd looked at her last night, he didn't see scandal or tragedy. She typed back, "One coffee, no notebooks." They met that afternoon at a quiet cafe near the New York Public Library. Alex was already there, sipping a black coffee, wearing a navy sweater instead of a suit. His smile was genuine, easy. "I was starting to think you'd change your mind," he said. Sophia sat across from him. "I almost did." "I get it," he said gently. "People probably try to turn your life into a headline." She nodded, stirring her latte. "That's why I started my own firm, so women could control their stories before someone else writes them." He smiled. "And yet, you still came to meet a writer." She laughed quietly. "Maybe I'm just testing my bravery." They talked for hours, not about the past, but about books, travel, the strange beauty of resilience. Alex told her about his years covering social issues and how he'd grown tired of stories that focused on tragedy without celebrating recovery. "People love pain," he said, "but they rarely ask what comes after it." Sophia looked out the window. "After pain comes clarity," she said softly. "It's the only gift suffering leaves behind." When they finally stood to leave, Alex handed her a small notebook. "I know you don't like interviews," he said, "but if you ever feel like writing your story in your own words, I'd love to help you publish it, on your terms." Sophia smiled, touched by his sincerity. "I'll think about it." That evening, back home, Marcus called to check in. "How was your day, sweetheart?" "Unexpected," she said, glancing at the notebook on her desk. He chuckled. "Good unexpected or bad unexpected?" She smiled. "The kind that makes you realize life still has good people." Marcus's tone softened. "You deserve good, Sophia. Don't be afraid of it." Later that night, after putting Charlotte to bed, Sophia sat by the window, the city lights flickering like distant stars. She opened the notebook Alex had given her. On the first page he had written a single line, "For the woman who turned survival into strength." She traced the words with her fingertips, tears glistening in her eyes. Not from sadness, but from gratitude. Her thoughts drifted to Ethan for a brief moment, not with anger, but with finality. He no longer lived rent-free in her mind. He was a closed chapter, a scar that no longer hurt when touched. Sophia looked at her reflection in the glass, calm, confident, alive. She whispered to herself, "He broke my heart, but he didn't break me." Outside, spring rain began to fall softly, washing the city clean once again. Because sometimes, healing isn't found in forgetting, it's found in letting yourself be seen by someone new. It was a bright morning in June when Sophia's peace was interrupted. She was sitting in her office at Phoenix Media, reviewing a campaign proposal for a women's shelter in Brooklyn, when her assistant, Mia, rushed in, pale-faced and trembling. "Sophia," she said, holding a phone. "You need to see this." On the screen was a news alert. Ethan Bennett released early on parole. Sophia froze. Her hands tightened around the edge of her desk. She read the headline twice, then once more, hoping the words would change. They didn't. He was free. For a long moment, she said nothing. The hum of the city below her office windows faded into silence. Her heartbeat thudded in her ears. "Are you okay?" Mia asked softly. Sophia nodded slowly. "Yeah," she said. "I just didn't expect it to happen so soon." After Mia left, Sophia stared out at the Manhattan skyline, remembering every detail of the night that had almost taken her life. The lights, the music, the fall. All of it. But instead of fear, she felt something else rise inside her. Composure. That evening, she drove to her father's house in Long Island. Marcus met her at the door, already holding the same newspaper. "I saw," he said grimly. Sophia stepped inside, removing her sunglasses. "They let him out early for good behavior. Can you believe that?" Marcus poured her a glass of water and sat beside her. "I can believe it," he said quietly. "The system isn't perfect, but you are safe, Sophia. He can't touch you now." She exhaled slowly. "I'm not afraid of him anymore, but I need to make sure he knows that." Marcus studied her face. There was no trembling, no panic, only resolve. He nodded slowly. "If he tries to contact you, we'll handle it, legally and quickly." But deep down, Sophia already knew Ethan wouldn't stay silent. Men like him never did. 2 nights later, it happened. A knock at her apartment door around midnight. She froze, holding Charlotte in her arms. When she looked through the peephole, her blood ran cold. Ethan. He looked thinner, older, but the same cold arrogance still lingered in his eyes. She didn't open the door. "Sophia," he called softly. "I just want to talk." She stayed silent. "I've changed," he continued. "I've been in therapy. I think about you every day, about what I did, about how wrong I was." Still, she didn't move. "I just want to see my daughter," he pleaded. "Please." Sophia took a deep breath, turned on her phone camera, and began recording. Then, in a steady voice, she said through the door, "Leave, Ethan. You're violating your parole by being here. If you don't, I'll call the police." There was a pause. She could almost hear his breath quicken. Then his voice changed, colder, sharper. "You think you're better than me now? With your little company and your sympathy votes? Don't forget who made you, Sophia." Her heart pounded, but her tone didn't waver. "No, Ethan. You broke me. I made myself." She called 911. Within minutes, the police arrived. Ethan tried to argue, to act innocent, but the body cam footage and Sophia's video left no room for lies. He was taken back into custody for violating parole. As the officers led him away, their eyes met through the window. There was no fear this time, only finality. The next morning, Marcus called. "He's gone back in. You handled it perfectly," he said. Sophia smiled faintly. "This time, I didn't need anyone to save me." She hung up, walked into Charlotte's room, and kissed her daughter's forehead. The sunlight streamed across the crib, warm and soft. Because sometimes, closure isn't a conversation. It's standing tall when the past comes knocking. It had been a year since that horrific Christmas night. 1 year since Sophia Bennett had been left bleeding on a marble floor, betrayed by the man she once called her husband. And now, on a crisp December morning, she stood outside the New York County Courthouse, the same place where Ethan Bennett would face his final sentencing. The sky was pale blue, streaked with winter clouds. Snowflakes drifted gently around her as she adjusted her coat, the soft hum of the city pulsing in her ears. She wasn't here for revenge. She was here for closure. Inside the courtroom, reporters lined the benches, their cameras waiting to capture the moment. Sophia took her seat beside Marcus, who sat upright in full uniform, his presence commanding quiet respect. Across the aisle, Ethan entered in handcuffs, his once proud face hollow, his eyes sunken with sleeplessness. Gone were the designer suits and confidence. He looked smaller, diminished, the ghost of his former self. When their eyes met, Sophia felt no anger, just distance. She was free from the weight of his power. The judge entered and the room fell silent. After a brief review of the charges, domestic assault, financial fraud, parole violation, the final decision came swift and clear. "Ethan Bennett," the judge said, his tone firm, "you are hereby sentenced to 10 years in federal prison without the possibility of early parole." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Ethan's lawyer tried to object, but the gavel struck. It was over. Ethan turned toward Sophia, his expression desperate. "Sophia, please, tell them." But she simply shook her head. "I already did," she said softly. "I told them the truth." The bailiffs led him away, and as the courtroom door shut behind him, Sophia exhaled for what felt like the first time in years. Marcus placed a strong hand on her shoulder. "It's done, sweetheart." She nodded. Finally. Outside, reporters swarmed, microphones thrust forward. "Miss Bennet, how do you feel now that the man who hurt you is going to prison?" Sophia paused, looking into the flashing cameras. Her voice was calm but powerful. This was never about punishment. It was about accountability. Women deserve to live without fear, to speak without being silenced. That's all this ever was. The crowd fell silent. For once there were no sensational questions, no intrusive flashes. Only respect. Later that evening, Sophia walked alone through Central Park, snow crunching softly beneath her boots. She stopped by the lake, watching the reflection of the city lights ripple across the water. Her reflection stared back, not the broken woman from before, but a survivor who had found her strength. Her phone buzzed. A message from Alex Carter. "Just watched your statement on CNN. You were incredible." "Dinner to celebrate?" She smiled. "Only if there's cheesecake." "Deal," he replied. As she walked home, she passed a newsstand displaying the morning paper. On the front page was a photo of her outside the courthouse, hand raised, eyes bright. The headline read, "Sophia Bennet, the woman who changed the story." At home, Charlotte ran into her arms, laughing. Sophia lifted her daughter high, spinning her in circles as the little girl giggled uncontrollably. The baby in her belly, now nearly due, kicked in rhythm. Marcus watched from the doorway, smiling. "You did it, Sophia." She looked up at him, her eyes full of peace. "No, Dad, we did." That night, as snow began to fall again, Sophia stood on her balcony, the city glowing beneath her. She whispered into the cold air, "I took back my name, and this time it belongs only to me." Because the truest revenge isn't destruction, it's becoming everything they said you couldn't be. 3 months passed since Ethan Bennett's final sentencing, and for the first time in years, Sophia Bennett's world was quiet. The kind of quiet that didn't feel like emptiness, but peace. She had moved into a brownstone in the Upper West Side, warm, sunlit rooms filled with baby laughter, books, and the smell of fresh coffee every morning. Her daughter Charlotte, now 2, ran through the living room, her curls bouncing as she chased a stuffed bunny. The newborn slept soundly in a bassinet nearby, a boy named Liam Marcus Bennett after the man who had stood by her through it all. Sophia poured herself a cup of coffee and sat by the window, watching the city below. The world felt softer now, kinder. Her scars hadn't disappeared, but they no longer defined her. They had become part of her strength. The doorbell rang. She opened it to find Alex Carter standing there, holding a bouquet of white lilies and wearing that same gentle smile she'd come to trust. "You're supposed to be resting," he said, stepping inside. "I am," she said, smiling. "But you know me, rest isn't my strongest skill." He chuckled, setting the flowers on the counter. "Then I guess I'll just have to keep you company." Their friendship had grown slowly, naturally. Morning walks, long phone calls, shared meals that turned into laughter. He never rushed her, never treated her like someone broken. He simply showed up, again and again, until she began to believe that not all men left destruction in their wake. As he poured himself a cup of coffee, she teased, "You keep showing up like this. People will start talking." "Let them," he said easily. "I like being the guy who shows up." They both laughed, the kind of laugh that felt like sunshine through an open window. Later, they sat on the couch, Charlotte climbing onto Alex's lap with a shy grin. He read to her from a picture book, his voice soft and animated. Sophia watched quietly, her heart swelling. For years she had prayed for peace, not perfection, just peace, and somehow it had arrived in the most ordinary, beautiful way. "Do you ever miss it?" Alex asked suddenly, looking up. "The old life? The glamour, the parties, the cameras?" Sophia smiled wistfully. "I thought I would, but when you've lived through hell, simplicity feels like luxury." He nodded. "You're different now." "I had to be," she said. "Pain changes you, but healing shapes you." The conversation drifted to work. Phoenix Media had just launched a national campaign supporting women entrepreneurs. Sophia was proud, not just because it succeeded, but because it gave women like her the tools to rebuild. "Every story matters," she said. "Every woman deserves to be seen." As the evening faded, Alex stood to leave. "Dinner tomorrow?" Sophia hesitated, glancing at the sleeping baby. "If you don't mind takeout and lullabies," he smiled. "Sounds perfect." After he left, Sophia stood by the window, the city glowing beneath the night sky. She thought about the path that had brought her here. The pain, the fear, the courage it took to stand again. She whispered softly, "Thank you, God, for the second chance." Her phone buzzed. A message from Alex. "You've been through the fire, Sophia, and somehow you came out shining." She smiled, her heart warm. Charlotte stirred in her crib, mumbling sleepily. Sophia leaned down, brushing a kiss on her daughter's forehead. "We're safe now," she whispered. "We're home." Then she turned out the lights, the soft lullaby of New York humming in the background. Because sometimes, love doesn't arrive to save you. It arrives to remind you that you were already saved. It was almost 1 year to the day since that infamous Christmas night. The memory of it still existed somewhere in the shadows of Sophia Bennett's mind. But it no longer owned her. The bruises had faded, the whispers had quieted, and tonight she would stand before the world again. Not as the woman who was kicked down, but as the woman who stood back up. The event was held at the Ritz-Carlton Ballroom in downtown Manhattan, the Women's Future Leadership Gala, where Phoenix Media was being honored for its impact. Sophia adjusted the silver pendant around her neck as she looked into the mirror. Her reflection no longer frightened her. Her eyes, once full of fear, now glowed with quiet power. "Mommy, pretty," Charlotte said, tugging at the hem of her dress. Sophia smiled. "Thank you, sweetheart." She bent down, kissed her daughter's forehead, and whispered, "This is for you and your brother." Her father, Marcus Hayes, waited in the living room, still sharp in his uniform even after years of service. "Ready to make the world listen again?" he asked with a proud grin. Sophia smiled softly. "Ready to remind them who I am." The black Mercedes arrived to take them downtown. As they drove through the glowing streets of Manhattan, Sophia gazed out at the skyline. She remembered the first time she came to the city with Ethan, believing love was forever. Now she was here as her own legacy. When they entered the ballroom, all eyes turned. The chandeliers glittered, and the sound of soft jazz filled the air. Cameras flashed, not in scandal this time, but in admiration. Reporters whispered her name, not as gossip, but as gratitude. Sophia made her way through the crowd with grace. She saw familiar faces, survivors she'd helped, journalists she'd once feared, and businesswomen who now called her an inspiration. By the stage, she spotted Alex Carter. He wore a dark gray suit and smiled when their eyes met. "You look incredible," he said, offering her a glass of sparkling water. "Trying to keep up with the journalists who keep writing about me," she teased. He chuckled. "Hey, we only write about stories that matter." As the host began to speak, Sophia's name echoed through the hall. "Please welcome the founder and CEO of Phoenix Media, Miss Sophia Bennett." The applause was thunderous. Sophia walked onto the stage, her heels clicking softly against the floor, her emerald gown shimmering under the lights. She looked over the crowd, took a deep breath, and began. "There was a time," she said, "when I believed that survival was enough, that as long as I could wake up and breathe, I had won. But survival isn't victory. Victory is rebuilding. Victory is standing here tonight and saying, pain does not define me, love does not destroy me, and silence does not protect anyone." The room was silent, hanging on her every word. "I built Phoenix Media because I wanted women to know that their stories matter. Not the edited versions told by others, but their truth, raw and real. The truth that heals, not hides." Her voice softened. "A year ago, I was a headline. Tonight, I am the author." Applause erupted. Cameras flashed. Marcus stood tall, his eyes shining with tears he'd never admit to. Alex clapped the loudest, his smile filled with pride. Sophia stepped down from the stage, let her heart light. For once, she didn't feel watched. She felt seen. Outside, the night air was cool. Snow had begun to fall again, soft and slow. Alex handed her his coat. "You did it," he said quietly. Sophia looked up at the falling snow and smiled. "No," she said. "We're just getting started. Because redemption isn't about forgetting the past. It's about owning it so completely that it can never own you again." Morning sunlight spilled through the wide glass windows of Sophia Bennett's new office on Fifth Avenue. Phoenix Media had grown from a modest apartment project into a full-scale agency occupying 2 entire floors, a place alive with energy, women's laughter, and the rhythm of second chances. The walls were lined with framed magazine covers featuring stories her team had helped rewrite. From scandal to strength, voices that rise, breaking the silence. Sophia stood near the window, holding a cup of black coffee. She wore a white blazer, her hair tied neatly, her expression calm but confident. The city buzzed beneath her feet, but inside everything was still. She smiled softly. It was the first anniversary of Phoenix Media and her rebirth. Her assistant, Mia, entered with a bright grin. "The press is already downstairs. You're trending again, this time for good reasons." Sophia laughed quietly. "Let's keep it that way." On her desk sat a bouquet of white roses. The card read, "To the woman who turned pain into purpose. Proud of you, Alex." She touched the petals gently, warmth blooming in her chest. Later that morning, Marcus arrived in full uniform, carrying Charlotte in his arms and holding a tiny American flag she'd insisted on bringing. "For Mommy's office," Charlotte declared proudly. Sophia laughed and hugged her daughter tight. "You're my best decoration," she said. Marcus looked around the office, impressed. "You've done good, kiddo," he said. "Your mom would have been proud of this place." Sophia smiled softly. "I hope so." He handed her an envelope. "You've been invited to the President's Advisory Board on Women's Empowerment. They want you to represent survivors and entrepreneurs nationwide." She froze, stunned. "You're kidding," Marcus grinned. "I never joke about White House invitations." Sophia's hands trembled slightly as she held the letter. Just a year ago, she'd been a woman fighting to stay alive. Now, she was being asked to represent others like her on the national stage. It didn't feel real. That afternoon, reporters filled the conference room for Phoenix Media's anniversary event. Cameras flashed as Sophia stepped up to the podium. The hum of anticipation filled the air. She began speaking, her voice strong yet intimate. "When I started this company, I wasn't trying to build a business," she said. "I was trying to build a lifeline for myself and for every woman who's ever been told her story doesn't matter. We are here to say it does, that we do." Her eyes scanned the room. Journalists, survivors, allies, even her father, who stood at the back like a silent pillar. "People often ask me if I've forgiven the man who hurt me," she continued. "The truth is, forgiveness isn't for him. It's for me, because I refuse to carry his weight one more step into my future." The audience erupted in applause. As the event ended, Sophia walked backstage to find Alex waiting. "You keep making headlines," he teased. "I might have to quit journalism and work for you." She smiled. "You wouldn't survive my deadlines." He laughed, then grew serious. "Sophia, I know I've said this before, but what you've done, it's bigger than survival. You gave people hope." She looked at him quietly. "Hope saved me first." They walked out together into the evening light. The city glowed gold, the air filled with the hum of life. For the first time, Sophia didn't feel like she was walking away from her past. She was walking toward her future. As they reached the street, Charlotte ran ahead, her laughter echoing through the air. Sophia called out, "Careful, sweetheart." Alex smiled. "She's fearless, just like her mom." Sophia looked up at the sky, her heart full. "No," she said softly. "She's free, that's even better, because the greatest victory isn't surviving the storm, it's learning how to build light from the ruins it leaves behind." Winter had returned to New York City, but this time, it didn't bring pain. It brought peace. Snow fell softly over the skyline, blanketing the streets of Manhattan in quiet light. Inside her warm brownstone, Sophia Bennett sat by the window, watching Charlotte and baby Liam play near the Christmas tree. The laughter of her children filled the home like music, pure, innocent, and alive. A year ago, this same season had nearly destroyed her. Tonight, it reminded her she'd survived it and become someone stronger. The fireplace crackled. Marcus sat nearby in his favorite chair, reading a worn military memoir, his glasses sliding down his nose. He looked up and smiled. "You've come a long way, Sophia," he said. "You didn't just rebuild, you rose." Sophia smiled softly. "You taught me how. You always said pain doesn't make you weaker. It just shows you what you're made of." Marcus chuckled. "I said that to make you stop crying when you scraped your knee at 8. "Still worked," she said, laughing. The doorbell rang. When Sophia opened it, she found Alex Carter standing on the doorstep, snow clinging to his coat, a small gift bag in hand. "Merry Christmas," he said with that easy smile that had slowly woven its way into her heart. "You're early." she teased. I was afraid I'd miss the cookies, he said, stepping inside. The room smelled of cinnamon and pine. Charlotte ran up to hug him, giggling. Uncle Alex, Mommy made too many cookies. That's not a problem, he said, winking at Sophia. As they gathered in the living room, the world outside seemed distant. No cameras, no judgment, no whispers. Just family. Just peace. After dinner, they exchanged small gifts. Marcus received a new watch engraved with the words, "For the man who never stopped protecting." Charlotte unwrapped a stuffed unicorn and squealed with joy. Alex handed Sophia a small velvet box. She hesitated. Alex, open it, he said gently. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a pendant shaped like a phoenix, wings outstretched, rising from flame. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. It's beautiful. It reminded me of you, Alex said softly. You don't just survive fire, Sophia. You redefine it. For a long moment they just looked at each other. No words, just the understanding of two people who had learned what it meant to rebuild. Then slowly, she leaned forward and kissed him. It wasn't dramatic or rushed, just real, warm, and right. Marcus pretended to be focused on his book, but smiled quietly behind it. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, Sophia sat by the window again, the city lights reflecting off the glass. Snow continued to fall, each flake a reminder of how far she'd come. She picked up her journal, the one she'd kept since the hospital, and began to write. A year ago, I thought my life was ending. I thought pain was permanent and love was dangerous. But today, I know better. Pain is a teacher. Love is not the enemy. Fear is. And strength isn't built in the moments we win, but in the moments we refuse to give up. She set the pen down, looking out at the snow-covered city that had once broken her and now reflected her light back at her. In the nursery, Liam stirred, letting out a soft cry. Sophia walked over, lifting him gently into her arms. You're safe, she whispered. We all are. The clock struck midnight. A new year had begun. Sophia stood at the window, holding her son, watching the city glow beneath falling snow. Because in the end, her story was never about what destroyed her. It was about what she built after, and that, she knew, was what made her truly alive. So that's how our story finally comes to an end. But if you're still here listening until this very moment, it means something in this journey touched your heart, maybe in a quiet, personal way. Sophia's story isn't just about pain, betrayal, or revenge. It's about rebirth, about finding strength in the ashes and learning that healing doesn't mean forgetting, it means transforming. Like Marcus Aurelius once wrote, the obstacle is the way. Every heartbreak, every scar, every night you thought you couldn't keep going, they were never walls, only doorways toward the person you were meant to become. Sophia reminds us that peace isn't something we find, it's something we build, brick by brick, with forgiveness, courage, and truth. And maybe that's the quiet lesson for all of us. You can survive the fire, and you can rise brighter because of it. If this story reached you, even just a little, don't forget to hit like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so we can keep walking through these powerful stories together. Because healing isn't a destination, my friend. It's a journey we take, one heart at a time.